Welcome to the Reading Night series. This is Davidson, reading from his book A Surrealist Manifesto, featuring the story It. It. There was a time for more of it, so we pulled it out and began twisting it about in our hands. We felt nice as it crept into the room, slowly oozing through the cracks in the walls, in the room that was not there. It assembled on the floor in a lurid undress. Suddenly, the lights turned on, and there was a man standing at the door. A luminous silhouette, and he had some more of it there with him, in his hands, turning over and over again. The man sprung with a giggle and bounced into the room, jostling onto the couch, right into my immediate view of it. "Get out of my way!" I yelled with hell as I slipped it away for later. The man spoke to me. "So, do you want to buy it?" "Buy it? Buy it? Dear brother, you should give it." Just then he noticed the thing that screams on the table and got very frightened. He shot a worried glance my way. "What time is it?" "Time? Time is irrelevant." "What do you mean time is irrelevant? I thought you said time is the continuity of all things." "Yes, it is, but the moment is the point of power." "The moment is the point of power? I thought you said the moment is eternal." No, I said it's 3:30. 3:30? I thought you said it was 2 o'clock. Just then I stood corrected. "It is 3:96:13, actually," said the thing that screams on the table. So the man with me stood up as well and faced the corner until the bell rang, and since I didn't even know we had a bell, it took a very long time. So I decided there was some time for more of it, and I pulled it out and began twisting it about in our hands. The man standing in the corner screamed out as he wrestled with the whole concept of time. You see, it was this huge, twisting, convulsing, massive, multi-dimensional being that issued into itself to infinity. Of course, time is not a closed system, but the man seemed to flicker and sometimes disappear altogether, so we didn't often take any notice of him. We are much more interested in it. It made us feel good as we slipped it onto our skins. "Do you still love me?" asked the thing that screams on the table. "Of course I still love you," I said, although I averted my eyes. You see, I didn't like to look directly at the thing that screams on the table. It's very painful. I preferred to feel it instead, because its body was formed out of a scream focused on the table. Now, when your body is formed out of a scream, it vibrates intensely, so it was fairly easy to feel out its approximate dimension in space. Space was an old friend of mine, and I thanked it for approximate dimension. "I love you too," said Space, and I was all of very pleased with myself until I glanced over at the man who was standing in the corner. I became very distressed by the sight of him, because he was no longer wrestling with time, but making love to it. He began to shoot off on fourth-dimensional angles, apparently very pleased with himself for having mastered time. This fourth-dimensional thing, of course, upset the approximate dimension of my old friend Space, so he asked if we could leave. "Let's go visit the reality human," said the thing that now screams on the floor as it crawls its way out of the room through an act of pure relativity. So I crawled out of the room as well, but not before I grabbed some more of it and shoved it in my pocket for later. We searched for the reality human with no swift success. It was all because of my friend Space and his damned approximate dimensions spreading things around. The whole illusion of approximate dimension often places things much farther away than they truly are, making life experience slightly more difficult than necessary, but it was very colorful in conversations, so I kept him around me in very tightly revolving circles. "There's the reality human!" screamed the thing that screams on the relative floor. I glanced up quickly. It was the reality human. "No wonder it was so difficult to find," I said. "It has fragmented back down into a human reality again." I hated it when the reality human did this, because it would fragment itself into all of these individual human units that could no longer realize the whole for its parts. It was this weird amnesia spell intended to induce learning, but all I saw was a big mess that made it overall very difficult to communicate. Personally, I think he's just tripping. "Well, I'm not about to put up with this human reality, dual identity, divided self bullshit," said the thing that screams on the edge of reality, relatively speaking. "It was your idea," said Space sharply, "and I'm going in." So we all entered the human reality from the other side to try and communicate with the original reality human. During the transition into human reality, I noticed an infinitely long span of time. Well, I thought, what a perfect chance to take time for some more of it. So we pulled it out and began twisting it around our soul until it made me bleed from the very nervous center of our being. In a cracked voice void of feeling, we feels nice as the shiny razor-sharp edges licks the sides of our bodies. Suddenly, I was forced to take notice of the biological self. It moves, it breathes, it screams, and then we are alone. In our great wakeful loneliness, we cried out to the thing that screams in our brains. "Ah! What time is it?" "I am sorry," replied the scream. "The time is not available to you right now because you are stuck in infinity, basically forever." A wicked laugh rang out as it shrieked, "You're fucked up now!" "Well, it looks like we are definitely alone," I said to the inner circular council of self amidst murmurs and mumbling. There were 12 of us, and we were not pleased at all, so a meeting was called to order. It was the first time in my life that I noticed there was no more time left for it. We cried out into the face of our dear Father Night with an unholy howling, and then it ceased. The whole temple of self is an immensely intricate fourth-dimensional cube, which is overall very difficult to picture. I wandered about stricken dumb with awe, for I had not been to the temple of self for a very long time. I didn't like to meet with the other fragments of myself because we all came up with the same ideas at once, thinking simultaneous thoughts and making conversation extremely boring. They all looked exactly like me as well, which was expectantly unnerving. I never knew who was who, although I wouldn't mention it to the others because it had become sort of a taboo question to ask. Who am I? I mean, really, who am I? It's just too damn profound to discover that identity does not truly exist, being in itself a simple illusion of the memory. The ego originally produced the illusion of identity because he thought it was a fine new dress to wear to the ball. It quickly became a dependence. Ego identity is one of those underground addictions that one tries not to mention in open social circles. I deny it always. I looked around at everyone else there in the temple of self, and all 11 of them began to look around at me. God, that's eerie, I thought, as a shiver ran down my back, and I quickly went back to my meticulous scrutiny of the wall. Everyone else, of course, thought the same thing, and immediately did just the same. Suddenly, the lights turned on, and there was a man standing at the door. The man strutted into the temple with great confidence, as though this place was more rightly his plane than mine. Just who is writing this story, anyways? Just the way he filtered gracefully along the angles of reality was overall frightening. I think this is why I took an immediate liking to him. It was then I noticed he looked very much the same as the rest of us. I mean, he had my basic facial features, but they sort of gleamed off on 45-degree angles. Yes, it was definitely a distorted version of the rest of us, but one that I did not understand. He smoothly spoke, calming the tension in the temple of self. "I am the variable." The variable, we thought, while muttering amongst ourselves in an unperceived horror. Did you perceive that too? The variable spoke on. "I am the variable, and there is change in my coming." The moment was very tense, and the self-circle of 12 suddenly broke into a figure 8 and dispersed into chaotic individuality. I hit my head. The variable spoke on. "Yes, there is great changes in my coming, and there's nothing you can do about it, so you might as well start digging up at the floor, my friends." A few of the selves followed the variable's directions and began digging at the floor, but personally I was shocked with the whole idea. I mean, this is the temple of self. If self is the room, then how can the room know what is outside of itself? A few of the other selves wandered about ignoring the variable and doing contradictory things as a statement of their fondly newfound individuality. The variable conducted a disorderly harmony of excavation right there in the temple of self, from an inconspicuous standpoint against the far wall. I knew it well. Once alone, I approached this variable with an extreme of caution, more out of fear than out of respect. I inquired, "Are you disorder?" He replied, "I am aware." I asked again ignorantly, Are you entropy? He replied, I am in my becoming. I further inquired, if everything is moving into disorder, then will not everything soon fall apart into oblivion? Oblivion is actually quite a nice place to be. The chaos of perfect ordered unity. I am the disorder of oneness. I decided to give up. I couldn't understand this variable thing, and the conversation was overall poor, so I decided to help the others dig at the floor. Hopefully, if we finished soon, I might be able to take some time for more of it. I mean, after all, I am independent of the other 11 selves now, free to think my own personal thoughts of perversion and grandeur. Now I wouldn't have to share it with any of the others. We fantasized carefully about it as we fondled it about in my pockets. I abandoned the digging and decided to sneak off on a 37-degree cotangent to take time for some more of it. I pulled it out, my hands trembling as sweat dripped down my nose. I held it out nervously, drawing back on a stimulator. Oh, but it felt so good as it rushed through my veins and screamed out of my own wretched oral orifice. There was a little bit of pain as it sucked on my tissues with its metal saw teeth. There was clearly something different about it. Apparently, it had changed as well. That frightened me, so we put it carefully away for later, after we calmed down a bit. When I returned to the big dig, the scene was both shocking and horrifying. I was intrigued. They seemed to have dug up some new form of life. I approached an individual and asked, "What's happening?" I was informed, "We've found some species of worm organism that eats this drug to survive. Some of the others are trying the drug substance out now." "Where's the variable?" I asked. "We're not sure, but Paul is trying to figure out where he is not, and where he probably will be in the near future. He's over there with the calculator." We were abruptly interrupted by the approach of a third. David, my son! We've detected the nature of the substance." "Well?" David yearned, leaning into Brother Brian. "Well, I'm completely stoned myself." The two individuals began laughing, merrily patting me on the back, and welcoming me over to the fire with a few other followers. As we entered the circle, I overheard a fragment of conversation. "If we are followers, then who exactly are we following?" "Brother, we follow no one but our own middle path of spontaneous divine energy." "Oh yes, well of course, I forgot." "I know, you always do. That's why you're so good at it." There was chuckling and good cheer among the men tonight. If all went well, tomorrow we would be out of the desert, reaching the human city by nightfall. That is, if all went well, which, invariably, it did not, in verse square. Late in the evening, something untoward happened. Well, that's all we have time for now. For the rest of the story, order The Thing That Screams on the Table, A Surrealist Manifesto by Davidson, available at www.zenpublishing.com.